Ready.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for this is actually our second annual Zoom that we've done. We did one prior to the 2021 race that, as many of you know, didn't occur. But I'm Ray Cullum, and I'm on the Marion Bermuda Race Organizing Committee, plus a member of the Board of Trustees. The race is sponsored by three yacht clubs. I think everyone knows: the Beverly Yacht Club, the Royal Hamilton Amateur Dinghy Club, and the Blue Water Sailing Club. Special thanks this evening to the Blue Water Sailing Club for hosting this event with their work and technical expertise. So thank you, Blue Water. For many of you, much of what you hear may not be new tonight, but I'm sure there will be some new takeaways, especially the changes for the 2023 race. If you have a question, we have a live chat room with committee members ready to answer your questions. We won't be taking questions live until the presentation is concluded, but you can use the chat room at any time and get your question answered. If you have a question that's not answered, we will follow up in the chat room, or you can go to our website, race@MarionBermuda.com, and pose the question, and that always goes to an expert within the committee to answer your question. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the Marion Bermuda website. You will be muted during the Zoom presentation, but if for some reason you aren't muted, please mute yourself, but we've tried to do it through a master mute. You should also set your view, if you're upper right-hand corner, set your view to side-by-side speaker. That will give you a better view of the screen and the presentation without all the other folks that are joining us for tonight's presentation. So again, thank you very much. Very happy that we have the number of folks that we do, a good number. And I hope all of you are going to be doing the race in 2023. So with that, I'm going to introduce our presenter tonight, also a multiple Bermuda Race sailor, a member of the Marion Bermuda Race Organizing Committee, and a presenter for us for a number of years. So please let me introduce Bob Kostyla.
Well, thank you, Ray, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. As Ray said, my name is Bob Kostyla, and I will be the presenter. Okay. Excuse me, I have to go to screen share. It's already up. It's not slides on advancing.
Click on the slide. Click on the screen.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is the agenda for this evening. A brief introduction about the race, then an overview of the race itself, a review of the rules and regulations which govern the race, how to prepare for the race, covering the boat, crew, comments for when you arrive in Bermuda, and at the end, some important dates, some important stuff, and a list of resources that you can use to prepare. So assume everyone listening is a sailor, and in particular, you're a racer. You love the competition of racing sailboats. You probably do a lot around the buoy races during the week and weekends, perhaps some distance racing along the coast, and maybe even an ocean race, or you're considering to do an ocean race. Well, for an ocean race, Marion to Bermuda is a reasonable offshore passage, which can be done safely and with relative comfort in a well-founded, well-equipped boat. As with all races, it's going to present you with a number of strategic and tactical challenges, in particular, the Gulf Stream, which we'll cover later. Also, the handicap system which we use for the race is designed so that all boats, whether they are an older, more traditional cruising yacht or a more modern design, have a fair opportunity to do well in the race, both within their classes and in the race overall. And finally, Marion Bermuda is the last offshore race that has a dedicated celestial class, and we'll cover that a bit later also. The committees which run the race, the organizing committee and the race committee, are both very well experienced, having been in their roles probably 10 to 15 years. And in addition to that experience, they are all sailors and race participants. We also offer assistance through what we call a co-pilot program. This is a mentoring program so that if you are taking your boat offshore for the first time, or this is your first time in an offshore race, we have experienced skippers who have done the race, who will consult and advise you how to prepare your boat for the race to conform to the safety requirements of the race. We also have two educational programs. The first is the Northeast Ocean Race Symposium, which will be an all-day in-depth review of offshore sailing and offshore racing in particular. And also with US Sailing and the Cruising Club of America, we are sponsoring an offshore safety at sea program, which can result in an offshore safety certificate. And as with all racing, you win someplace, and Bermuda is a great destination, both for all race participants and for their families and friends who fly in to join them. Okay, a couple of comments for 2023. We've introduced a performance class. This is for boats with the more advanced technologies. They will be racing in a class amongst themselves as well as with the general fleet. The multi-hull class returns. I think this was multi-hulls were last sailed in 2015. They will be back in 23 for boats 32 to 80 feet long. We're also trying to refine our handicap system with the next iteration of the velocity prediction program, or the offshore racing rule. It's called performance curve scoring. Again, it's designed to better level the playing field, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail further in the presentation. And lastly, the Northeast Ocean Race Symposium, which I mentioned previously, and I will mention again later in the presentation. Okay, the race has 3 divisions. There's the original Founders Division for monohulls, 32 to 80 feet in length. There is a multi-hull division this year for boats 32 to 80. And in 2017, we introduced the Sail Training Division for large sailing vessels. And in 2023, we have 2 registered, one being the Spirit of Bermuda, and the second, the Pride of Baltimore. The race begins June 16th. It's 645 nautical miles. It starts off of Marion, Massachusetts, and it will finish off of St. David's Light, St. George's, Bermuda. We think of the race as having 3 distinct portions. One is the relatively short, but oftentimes challenging beat out of Buzzards Bay. Second is your approach to the Gulf Stream and across the stream. And then finally, your approach to Bermuda. Most of you are probably familiar with Buzzards Bay and have sailed there. During the summer, our winds are generally from the southwest, somewhere 12 to 15 knots, but it's not uncommon to have winds 20, 25, even to 30 knots. So oftentimes, getting out of Buzzards Bay, it's a beat. 2019, I think winds near the start of the race were 25 to 30 with 4 to 6 foot chop. And it was a grueling 3 hours or so to get out of the bay. So it can be one of the more challenging parts of the race. Also, we'd like to mention that as you leave Buzzards Bay by the island of Cuddy Hump, there's a shoal area called Sow and Pigs. It is marked by 2 government navigational aids, one of which is a mark of the course. Urge you to pay attention to those marks, because at times boats have tried to cut one of the marks and have ended up on the rocks. Once you exit Buzzards Bay, it'll probably take you 2 to 3 days to reach the Gulf Stream. Now, if you haven't crossed the Gulf Stream, you may wonder, how will I know when I get there? The biggest indicator usually is water temperature. The Atlantic that time of year is around probably in the 50s, mid 50s, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The Gulf Stream is around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So as you approach the stream, you'll see water temperature increasing. And if it hits 80, 81 degrees, that's a good indication that you're in the stream. Another indication is you probably notice a difference in the air. It's more humid, more tropical-like. And also, you probably notice a change in the weather. The Gulf Stream normally has its own weather patterns in sea state, usually for the worse. Sometimes, some years it's relatively benign. Other years, there are lots of squalls and high winds and high seas in the stream. To mention probably the most strategic decision that you'll make for the race is how you plan to, or where you plan to enter the stream, cross the stream, and exit the stream for your approach to Bermuda. The picture in this slide shows is from Gulf Stream Companion and shows sort of like an ideal depiction of the Gulf Stream. The stream is a moving body of water traveling west to east, somewhere around 4 knots. And in this depiction, you can see that there is a deep southerly meander running along the rum line, which is shown in red. As you come to the bottom of that meander, southerly meander, there's what's called the cold eddy. Eddies are circulating bodies of water that have broken off from the stream. To the north of the stream, they're referred to as warm eddies, and they circulate clockwise. South of the stream, they're referred to as cold eddies, and they circulate counterclockwise. The current towards the edge of the eddies is somewhere around 3 to 4 knots. So in this depiction of the stream, you would like to enter the stream in that meander, exit at the bottom of the meander, catch the 11 o'clock position of that cold eddy, which is circulating counterclockwise towards Bermuda at around maybe 3 knots towards the edge, pop out of it at around the 7 o'clock position, and then make your approach to the finish. Now, it's a great strategy. It looks good on paper. It's much more difficult to execute out in the water because remember, the stream is a moving body of water, so it's constantly changing. Those eddies are also changing. They change in their positions. So good practice is to start monitoring what the stream looks like, maybe starting in late April or May, and see how it's progressing, where the eddies are, how they're moving. And if you can catch that meander and you can catch the cold eddy, you can gain a lot of time. I was just doing some calculations for the presentation, and that southern meander is about 110 nautical miles. The eddy is about 80 nautical miles in diameter. So if you were just sailing that 190 nautical miles at 6 knots, it would take about 32 hours. If you can catch the favorable current in the southerly meander and at the edge of that cold eddy and pick up maybe an average of 3 knots so that your speed over the ground is now closer to 9 knots, you can travel that same distance in about 21 hours. So that's a huge pickup. Resources that you can use to get a better understanding of the stream is a pamphlet it's called Gulf Stream Companion. There's the Ocean Prediction Center, which you can find online. The stream will be covered at the Ocean Race Symposium in March. And of course, there are private routing systems. This shows the stream at the start of the 2019 race. Again, it has that deep southerly meander along the rum line or close to the rum line, and not shown on the slide that clearly. There are 2 or 3 cold eddies below the south of the meander. So it's very similar to the picture we saw in the previous slide. Okay, and once you're out of the stream, you'll probably be 200, 250 miles from the finish line. So as you approach Bermuda, one good rule of thumb is to not to sail too far east of the rum line. The prevailing winds in June around Bermuda are predominantly from the southwest, maybe 10, 11 knots. But oftentimes there's a high pressure system that sits 150 or so miles north of Bermuda, the Bermuda High. So if you sail too far east of the run line and sail into this high pressure system, you're going to find that you'll be trying to beat back towards the finish in these very light or non-existent winds. Another thing is that Bermuda is surrounded by reefs and reefs and reefs, about 245 square miles of reefs. So as you approach the island, you want to pay attention to your charts, where you are, read and reread the sailing instructions, because there are about 5 large navigational aids, I think 3 towers and a couple of sea buoys, which keep you off of the reefs. Plus, several of them are marks of the course which must be obeyed. And these are not standoff, these are not turning marks. You should keep a good distance between yourself and these navigational aids. And finally, as you approach the finish, there is a finish line shown in the slower picture. There are 2 buoys. The black buoy seen in the picture is the offshore buoy. There's another one 0.8 of a nautical mile in towards the island. You do have to cross the finish line, but that does not constitute your finish. You have officially finished when St. David's Light, which you can see just faintly at the bottom of the lower left of that picture. When St. David's Light bears 290 degrees from your mast. The finishing committee will be at the tower looking at your boat and taking your finish time when your mast is at 110 degrees magnetic, so the reciprocal of 290. So that's all explained in the sailing instructions. Again, those should be reviewed very carefully as you approach the island and the finish. The Marion to Bermuda race, it is a world sailing ocean race, which is defined as a race which will take you well offshore for extended periods of time, during which you can expect to encounter periods of severe weather, high winds, high sea state. You may incur emergencies on board, whether it be mechanical, boat related, or medical injuries. And you need to be prepared to be able to handle these weather conditions and any emergencies that you encounter without the expectation of outside assistance. So you have to be well prepared, both boat and crew. The rules and regulations which govern the race, first are the U.S. safety equipment requirements. Touch on that next slide. The notice of race, the sailing instructions, and the racing rules of sailing. The safety equipment requirements were instituted, I believe, in 2015 to replace the ISAF offshore special regulations. They are an easy set of safety requirements. Well, they're self-contained, they're easy to understand. It greatly facilitates the boat owner in preparing the boat to comply with these requirements. The requirements are generally self-contained. That means everything you need to know is contained on 10 or 12 pages. And with 1 or 2 exceptions, you don't have to refer to any external documents. The new requirements also help streamline the inspection and the approval process for boats to enter the race. A few examples what the things that you'll find in the safety equipment requirements. One new for this year is that we've traditionally required that you have a storm trysail. However, if your mainsail can be reefed to less than equal to or less than 50% of its hoist, then a storm trysail is not required. Other things from past years is the boat is required to have an AIS transponder receiver, and each crew member must wear a personal AIS. You also need to be able to demonstrate that you can steer your boat with a rudder disabled. Touch on that later on. And beginning in 2017, lifelines have to be uncoated stainless steel wire. The Dyneema type lifelines are no longer permitted. Okay, the handicap system for the race is based on the offshore racing rule using its velocity prediction program. The velocity prediction program is a proprietary algorithm which takes into consideration all the performance design characteristics of your boat, such as its length along the waterline, beam, displacement, keel, your rig, the sail plan, things of that nature. And it also considers the historical wind velocity and direction for the race. So for Marion Bermuda, there are three main components. It's generally a beat out of Buzzards Bay, then a reach to the Gulf Stream and through the stream, and then a broader reach to the finish line in Bermuda. So all those factors are taken into consideration to give you a handicap rating. And in this year, to help better level the playing fields for all boats, we're introducing something called performance curve scoring, which we'll touch on in a couple of slides. I see a valid certificate is a handicap certificate is required for the race. And these certificates can be based on a full or partial measurement of the boat. A full measurement is your actual boat has to be measured, physically measured, which can be expensive. But for Marion Bermuda, you only require a partial measurement. And a partial measurement is that if your boat is one of the 700 plus production sailboats, for which U.S. Sailing already has all the performance characteristics in their database, then you just simply fill out, I think it's a 1 or 2 page application that lists the sail plan that you plan to you're going to declare for the race, the rig that you have, and a couple other, if your boat has had any design modifications to it, that needs to be listed, and a few things of that nature. And it's relatively straightforward to get your certificate. Now, the handicap is based on boat performance as expressed in seconds per nautical mile that you race. It is, and also for the race, the entire fleet is handicapped based on that. And then a index boat or a reference boat is selected, and that boat is given a handicap of 1, and all the other boats are handicapped relative to that. So boats which are perhaps older, more traditional designs will be slower than the reference boat, and their handicaps will have a number of less than 1. And perhaps more modern boats with better design characteristics will have a handicap greater than 1. And the handicap at the race is a time on time rating, or the handicaps is time on time rating, not time on distance. And to calculate your corrected time, it's relatively straightforward. You take your elapsed time, multiply it by your handicap, and that is your corrected time. So for the example of the reference boat with the handicap of 1.00, that boat completes the race in 100 elapsed hours. Its corrected time is simply 100 multiplied by 1, or 100 hours. If another boat, a slower design with a handicap of 0.9, completes the race in 110 hours, its corrected time is 110 hours multiplied by 0.99, or 99 hours, and it will have finished ahead of that reference boat. If you need a new certificate for the race, if you don't have you need a new certificate, you don't have one that you're renewing, you can apply to U.S. Sailing now at this web address you can see on the slide. And if you already have a certificate, but it must be renewed for the 23 race, U.S. Sailing should have sent you an invitation in December. If you have not yet received one, you should soon, or you can contact U.S. Sailing. In all cases, the race committee must receive your handicap certificate by June the 7th. Now, we mentioned the high pressure system, which is often present off of Bermuda during the summer. What happens oftentimes is that the faster boats will race to the Gulf Stream, through the stream ahead. They make their approach to the Bermuda, and then they hit this high pressure system where the wind disappears and those faster boats stop. Meanwhile, the slower handicap boats, still maybe north of the stream or in the stream, they still have wind, they're still moving, and eventually they catch up to the boats that have stalled. And they all sit there. The picture that you can see on the right hand of the screen is the slide is a screenshot from the 2017 race, showing the parking lot effect. There are a large number of boats from the fleet spread across about 60 nautical miles, just stalled, waiting for the wind to fill in, which eventually it does. And there's now essentially a second start to the race. But problem is that now this race is only about 150 miles, and the faster boats with a higher handicap don't have the time, the distance and time to overcome that handicap. So that eventually it ends up favoring the more slowly rated boats. So in 2018, Newport to Bermuda tried to compensate for this by calculating a whole series of handicaps for wind velocities from 6 knots up to 24 knots. So there was a range of handicaps based upon wind conditions. And at the end of the race committee would select what they felt was the average wind velocity for the race. This certainly helped, but I guess it did not completely alleviate the issue. So the next iteration is called performance curve scoring, where using the velocity prediction program, a performance curve for each boat is generated from wind velocities. The slide shows from 4 knots up to 24 knots. That's wind velocity is on the x-axis, and boat speed expressed in seconds per nautical mile is on the y-axis. So then you finish the race committee takes your time, your finish time, as they always do, and they then calculate your elapsed time in seconds. Divide that total elapsed time in seconds by the distance of the race, 645 nautical miles, and they come up with your average boat speed for the race, your average performance as expressed in seconds per nautical mile. And so an example for the red boat's performance curve, you see the red dot on the left. You slide across to the performance curve and down to the index wind value. It shows 11 knots. So it says that the red boat performance was for 11 knots of index wind. The index wind is what the boat saw, in parentheses, or experienced during the race based upon its performance curve. The higher the index wind value, the more efficient the boat performed during the race. And the last step is that the fleet is then ranked by their index wind value, and then it's normalized to a single reference boat for the race. And from that, the corrected time is calculated. I think the essence is try to compensate for that parking lot effect, the high pressure system, which essentially creates a second start to the race. It's supposed to better level the playing field between the faster performing boats and the more traditional boats. This will be covered in detail in the Northeast Ocean Symposium by Jim Teetes, who is the person who developed this. Okay. During the race, you have 2 choices on how you can navigate. The first is electronic, which is about 75 to 80% of the boats will elect to navigate electronically. The second option is celestial navigation. If you elect to navigate celestially, there is a significant benefit to your rating. You'll have a 3% reduction in the rating. So going back to that index boat or benchmark boat with the rating of 1.00, its rating would, if they elect to travel navigate celestially, would be reduced to 0.97, and it completed the race in 100 elapsed hours. So its corrected time is now 100 times 0.97, or 97 hours, 3 hours faster than if it had raced with electronic navigation. And that 3 hours is a significant difference. Oftentimes positions within classes and within the overall fleet can be determined by seconds, or even, by minutes, or even sometimes less than a minute. So if you elect to travel, navigate celestially, you can have a significant improvement in your corrected time. If we also mentioned that we have tutorials on our website, and also celestial mentors, experienced celestial navigators that you can contact to assist you with your celestial navigational skills. Whichever method you choose to use for navigation, you must declare that to the race committee by June 7th. Okay, weather is always important in our lives, particularly in sailing, and most particularly when you're sailing offshore. Prior to the skipper's meeting, or captain's meeting, which occurs 5 p.m. on Thursday before the start of the race, you're permitted to use information, weather information and Gulfstream information from any source that is available to you. Private subscription to weather services, private route planning services, or the Gulfstream, private communications. Anything is available. However, commencing with the captain's meeting on Thursday afternoon, the only information that you are allowed to use is that which is generally available to the public. So you no longer can use your subscription services. This information has to be publicly available either through your satellite phone, your VHF, single sideband radio. I guess if you're close enough to shore, your cell phone also, but only publicly available information. Start preparing for the race. Best thing to do tomorrow is to review the race requirements, notice of race, sailing instructions, the safety equipment requirements, the inspection checklist. All these documents are available on MarionBermuda.com under, I believe it's resources. Okay, the race is open to all yachts, called well-founded yachts, but they do have to have, there are a few requirements. They have to have permanently installed enough bunks for the off-watch crew, an enclosed head, a galley with a stove and a fuel shutoff, permanently installed water tanks. In terms of ballast, the race used to be restricted to boats with fixed ballast, whether it be including a centerboard. Then it was open to boats with a retractable keel. In 2023, boats with movable water ballast or variable ballast, such as a canting keel, they are also permitted in the race. If you are entering your boat in the race for the first time, taking it offshore for the first time, we urge you to contact us and become paired with a co-pilot. Again, a co-pilot is an experienced skipper who has done the race, who understands how you have to prepare the boat to comply with the safety equipment requirements. They're available to help you get the boat prepared. We have a list of names on our website. They'll help you with your questions, and if they are physically close enough, they will probably even be willing to come and walk through your boat with you. The other thing you can also do is to request a courtesy inspection from one of our inspectors. So this is before the formal inspection for acceptance of the boat into the race, and the inspector will tell you with regards the boat already complies with the safety requirements, and things that you may have to change or upgrade to comply with some of the requirements. Again, the co-pilots and the inspectors are there to help you prepare your boat and to get your boat into the race, not to keep the boat out of it. So please take advantage of this program and courtesy inspections. Your boat also has to be equipped with an AIS, a GPS, an EPIRB, a spare compass. You have to carry paper charts. So you should have a chart of Buzzards Bay, the plotting chart from Martha's Vineyard, the islands, to Bermuda, and then appropriate local charts for when you arrive in Bermuda. You need to carry enough fuel so that you can power for 10 hours. For water, it's 5 gallons of water per crew member in the permanent tanks and 1 gallon per crew member emergency supply of water. These are normally in plastic jugs or containers. Food, you're supposed to carry provisions for 14 days. If you run out of those 14 days, you probably missed Bermuda. But the good news is you're probably close to the Azores. You need to have 2 permanent manual bilge pumps. One has to be operable from the deck with the cabin closed up. The other one has to be operable from below deck. The capacity of each of those pumps is at least 10 gallons per minute. The boat needs to carry an anchor and a rope that's appropriate for the size displacement of the boat. You're also required to have emergency navigation lights. These can either be permanently installed or they can be portable navigation lights, such as the LED lights, which are commonly available now. In either case, the emergency nav lights have to have their own separate power source. For the permanently installed ones, people usually use something like a motorcycle battery. The portable LED nav lights usually have their own batteries, so they're self-contained. A drogue is not required for the race, but it is certainly recommended that you carry one, both in case you encounter very heavy weather and you want to slow the boat down for better control. And as we'll see a little bit later on, it's also one technique that you can use to steer your boat with the rudder disabled. The heel of your mast must be permanently secured to the step. Most of the boats in the race will probably have a keel step mast. The upper picture shows a stainless steel pin that goes through the step and through the mast. Oftentimes that's referred to as a Bermuda pin, or you can also secure the mast to an adjoining structure. Either way, it's required. So in case of a knockdown or an inversion, the mast does not become free of the step and free to move around within the cabin, potentially doing significant injury to a person, or also could put a hole in the boat. Your hatchboards need to be secured so they prevent them from being lost. In the Gulf Stream, oftentimes you will encounter some nasty weather. You want to keep the cabin buttoned up to prevent water from going in. And oftentimes, people in the race will make a spare set of boards from marine plywood just for the race and keep their nicely varnished boards below and protected. The through hulls have to have a soft plug attached or sewed adjacent to them in case of failure. You should inspect your steering thoroughly before going offshore. This is something you probably do each spring anyways. When you commission your boat, you inspect the quadrant, the sheaves, steering cable, and the chain. This is particularly important going offshore. You certainly don't want to lose your steering several hundred miles out to sea. The boat must be equipped with some sort of anti-jibe device. Most boats will have a preventer, which is a line running attached to the bail of the boom, and then eventually running forward to a turning block at the bow, back into the cockpit to help control the boom when you're off the wind. Also, a boom restrainer, which commercially available, those are also acceptable. Boat is required to have jack lines positioned so that crew members can access the entire deck. Most boats have them running port and starboard, but you can also run them along center line. If there a run along the center line of the boat, make sure you have provision so that you can always be secured to the boat on the tether as you exit the cockpit and make your way around the dodger and the cabin top to get to that center line jack line. For sails, you're required to carry a storm jib. Either it's orange in itself or it has large orange patches to it. You're also required to have a heavy weather jib, a storm trysail, unless you have a main that you can deeply reef to less than 50% or less of its hoist. Solar stay is not required, but it's certainly a good thing to have. In heavy weather, you can set your storm jib or your heavy weather jib further aft, move the center of effort further over the keel, better control of the boat, more comfortable ride. And the last thing is that you have to have a way to display your sail numbers when your sails are not set. This can be a large piece of cloth with your sail numbers that you can spread out in the deck. Or you could use, in this picture, person uses storm trysail. It's horizontal. This is in case you become dismasted and you can't set your sails, or the wind is so high you're running bare poles. You have to carry rescue equipment. You have to have a man overboard module or something similar. A retrieval system such as a life sling and a life raft. The life raft has to be an offshore approved life raft that conforms to a SOLAS designation, ISAF, ORC, or this ISO designation. Pictured here are three different types of life raft which are approved for offshore. You need to carry SOLAS flares. SOLAS is safety of life at sea. These flares burn probably 10 times more intensely than a standard flare, and they burn for a much longer duration. You also have to have smoke canisters, SOLAS approved canisters. So you need to carry 2 orange smoke canisters. That's required. 4 handheld red flares, though not required, but certainly recommended, would be 6 red parachute flares. You need to have an EPIRB with an internal GPS, and must have the EPIRB registered to the boat. That's extremely important. For communications, you need to carry a satellite phone or some other satellite communication device, 2 VHF radios, 1 for the boat that's fixed, the other handheld. The handheld should either be waterproof or kept in a waterproof pouch. Both radios should be DESC and GPS capable. You also need to have a cell phone, a GPS receiver, and also some way to receive weather information, weather updates. Most people elect to download grid files to their satellite phone. Another option is to use a single sideband radio as pictured here in this slide. You need to carry damage control kits. You'll certainly want one that is for spare engine parts, impellers, filters, belts, things of that nature. Carry your manual and any specialized tools you need to repair your engine. A lot of owners put together their own damage kit as shown in this slide. All the tools, materials, things of that nature which they will need to effect repairs at sea. Also available are commercially available control kit, damage control kits, such as those available through landfall navigation. You also need to have an abandoned ship bag, and I have 2 major categories of things that should go into this bag. The first category is ways that you can signal to the outside world where you are. These vary from the high-tech EPIRB down to a simple signal mirror to catch someone's attention, but ways to communicate with the outside world. And the second category is items for the care and comfort of the people in the life raft. such as a first aid kit, your emergency water supplies, and rations. A number of years ago, a person named Henry Marks, who owned Landfall Navigation, put together this detailed list of what he recommends an abandoned ship bag should contain. Most of them fall into those two categories: signaling to the outside world and care and comfort of the people in the life raft. I'm not going to go through this, but this slide is available on the Landfall Navigation website, and you can also find it on the Marion Bermuda website on the presentation. And at this point, the last thing to do is to have a schematic of the boat showing the important safety pieces, such as fire extinguishers, where the through hulls are located, where you keep your spare parts, and where the first aid kit is kept. And at that point, you're ready to have the boat inspected and improved for entrance into the race. So the second part of the equation, you have the boat, is the crew. Crew is equally as important as the boat. Marion Bermuda is open to all world sailing classifications. Most of us are Group 1 sailors. We do this for the enjoyment. We are not professionals. We're not paid for our participation. Group 3 sailors, those professionals who are paid to race, who are paid to prepare a boat for race, to train a crew, to the sail makers who are making sails for the boat. Those professionals are also eligible to participate in the race. They will need approval from the race committee, and also they cannot be paid for their services. All boats should have 5 people, unless you're sailing shorthanded, which is 3 or 4, or you're sailing double-handed. We recommend to prepare the crew that everyone attend the Ocean Race Symposium and a safety at sea seminar. Also, everyone should have the gear required to go offshore, a good heavy set of foul weather gear, boots, things of that nature. It's not required that you have a medical exam before you participate in the race, but if you look at the demographics of the race, we're all on the older side, and probably most of us get an annual physical or physical every other year. I always make it a point to schedule my annual physical 3 or 4 months before the race. I don't have any health issues, but if I did have one, I would like to find out before I left for the race rather than when I was halfway to Bermuda. The other thing is you should be in relatively good shape when you participate in the race. It is 4 to 5 days on the boat. And you'll be changes in your sleeping patterns, your eating, your times when you're going to be cold, wet, and miserable, potentially. So you should be in good shape. And the other thing is the personality of the people that you're racing with, personalities of your crew. We've probably all raced with someone who is great fun to be with on a Wednesday night or Saturday afternoon, going around the buoys, going back to the club, having a couple of drinks, a lot of laughs. That person may not be the same person you want to spend 4 to 5 days with on a boat that gets increasingly smaller. You're going to get on the boat around 10 o'clock on Friday morning, and you may not get off the boat until Wednesday morning. So you can be on the boat a long time. The boat gets small. So you want people that you're compatible with. Certainly you want them to be sailors with some good racing skills or sailing skills, but you also want them to be team players, relatively easygoing and dependable. The experience that you should have to participate in the race is stated in the notice of race, and it's that the skipper and enough crew to safely manage the boat. So that leaves it, to the discretion of the skipper. Must have offshore experience of 250 nautical miles. This could be a passage or a race, but a number of people on the boat should have that offshore experience. Not everyone, because that leaves the opportunity of someone who doesn't have the experience to go off and have the experience. That's certainly how I was introduced to offshore racing. Also, 30% of the crew, which includes the skipper and the navigator or watch captain, must have an offshore safety at sea certificate. Also, we encourage everyone participating in the race to attend an online safety at sea seminar. We'll get into the details in a couple of slides. And in terms of first aid, Marion Bermuda does not require a certified first aider CPR person to be on board. However, it is strongly recommended that you have two on board, two rather than one, because if you only have one, that person may be the one who gets injured. Okay, this is a promo sheet for the Northeast Race Symposium. It will be held March 25th at Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts. It's an all-day event beginning, I think, at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And it's going to cover a large selection of topics, including crew selection, offshore communications, steering systems, preparation, repairs, also rigging system inspection and repairs, heavy weather management, understanding the rating system. And at the end of the day, there will be specific breakout sections for those who are participating in Marion to Bermuda, and I also believe the Bermuda 1-2, and those who are participating in Marblehead, Halifax. You can register for the symposium through the Marion Bermuda website. Okay, mentioned that 30% of the crew will have to have an international offshore safety certificate. Now, this is a two-part program. The first part is a safety at sea online training module. Oh, there are actually 15 modules in this online training. It is replaces what we used to sponsor as a all-day event, safety at sea seminar. So that is step one. And that must be completed, and you must have that certificate before you can go on to step two, which is hands-on training. This will take place at Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island. 2 dates are offered in January, 2 in March, and 2 in April. And the ones in April are really geared towards Marion to Bermuda participants. During this all-day event, you will do things such as fire suppression, firefighting, fire flares, damage control, and leak suppression. Then spend the afternoon in the pool. You'll be fully dressed in your foul weather gear, boots, things that, as you were out racing, you'll have your inflatable harness on with the tether, and then you'll jump in the water, experience what it's like to have that life vest inflate, float around in the water, get comfortable with that. You'll learn some safety techniques about huddling groups, getting groups of people together, not only for warmth, but also to make a larger target for an airplane looking for you. You'll learn how to write a life raft so that you can enter it, and then you practice getting into the life raft. It's a very worthwhile day. I've done it several times, and you learn something new every time you get there, and you certainly appreciate the importance of being prepared to be in the water, or to be offshore and potentially be in the water. Okay, before the race, you should go off and sail together, do some training, set all the sails that you intend to use during the race, particularly the storm sails, your storm jib or heavy weather jib. These are sails that normally live in a bag in a locker. The time to understand where they get tacked on, how to set the fair leads, run the sheets back to the cockpit. It's when it's 10 to 15 knots rather than when it's 25 to 30 knots. It's required that you go off and practice man overboard drills. As skipper, that you'll have to certify to race committee that you have done this. You should have an abandoned ship procedure for that unlikely event that you have to leave the boat. These are tasks such as contacting the Coast Guard that you have an emergency, 1 or 2 people to get the life raft in position to be deployed, getting the ditch bag, the emergency water supplies, tasks like that. They should be assigned ahead of time, not at the time that they're needed. You need to have an emergency tiller on board. Recommend that you practice using the emergency tiller before the race. This is another piece of safety equipment that really gets used, if ever. Had occasion in 2009, we lost our steering cable. We're about 100 miles or so from Bermuda. And when we went to put on the emergency tiller, we found out we had to take off the helmsman station. There were 8 boats that we had to remove. It was blowing 30 knots more, 10-foot seas. the cockpit was constantly being filled with water. Had we known that we had to take the helmsman station off to use the tiller, we would have done that before the race. So the time to practice and understand how to use all your emergency equipment is before the race. And last one on this slide is said you have to be able to demonstrate that you can steer the boat with a rudder disabled. This is where the drone comes in. A person named Michael Keyworth in 2014 made a video in which he took the rudder off his Swan 44 and using a drogue, which is deployed behind his boat, demonstrated how he could steer the boat. He had 2 lines attached to the drogue, which ran midship, port and starboard, through a turning block, and then back to the primary winches in the cockpit. And by changing the position of the drogue by easing or trimming in on those 2 sheets, he was able to steer the boat. It's about a 12-minute video, and you can find it just simply by Googling steering with drogue, and this will pop up almost top of the page. Just a list of suggested gear for the crew. They have inflatable vest and harness. Make sure that they have a rearm cartridge because they do go off accidentally. The ones with the salt tablet and a salt button, they can accidentally dissolve if you're up in the foredeck and you take a wave. I've seen that happen. And also the manual lanyard, sometimes that gets caught. So even if you have a hydrostatic trigger, you can accidentally inflate your life vest, and I have done that with the lanyard during a sail change. So you should carry a rearm cartridge. First 2 days of the race, it's going to be cold, particularly at night. So you should have some good cold weather clothing, watch cap, gloves, boots. And then once you hit the Gulf Stream and south, it's going to be warm. Particularly if you're in the stream in foul weather, the cabin is most likely going to be buttoned up, and off-watch crew feel like they're sleeping in a warm sauna. So you need to have warm weather clothing too. Certainly sail gloves, a headlamp for night watches. Make sure that everyone has a seasick medication, even if you're not prone to seasickness. It's good to start a regimen 1 or 2 days before the race. Then if you feel fine, day 2 after the race, you can discontinue it. But it's too late to start taking them if you're sick. Bring sunscreen, lip balm, certainly, and your personal medications. Also, Bermuda is a foreign country, so everyone needs to have a valid passport. And if you have a crew flying into Bermuda to help take the boat back, you should give them a return letter so it informs immigrations that they're leaving the island by boat. It'll facilitate getting through immigrations because they'll be arriving on a one-way ticket. Okay, all crew members have to have a personal AIS transmitter. This is a device which, if you go in the water and you activate it, or in some life vests, they're automatically activated now, it will send a VHF signal back to the boat, alerting them that you're in the water and what your location is. And if you have your AIS transmitter synced to the boat, you will show up on the chart plotter as a man overboard. It will also tell boats within the area that you're in the water. The AIS normally has a range of 2 to 5 nautical miles, depending upon the sea state, because it is a line of sight signal. If you're down in a trough, you may not be seen until you come back up again. But in any event, the boat that you just left is your best point of rescue. So that's why the AIS transmitter is required. A complementary device is a PLB, a personal locator beacon. These are not required, but they're recommended. I do carry one in my life vest also. This is like, operates like an EPIRB. If you're in the water and you activate it, it will send a signal to the satellite. Satellite contacts the Coast Guard. Coast Guard knows you're in the water and your location. However, the boat doesn't know where you are. Boat either has to contact the Coast Guard, or better yet, is that when you have a PLB, you register it online with the Coast Guard. And before you go off in the race, you go online and update your registration to indicate that I am sailing the Marion Bermuda Race aboard the sailing vessel Frolic. And if I have Ray's SAT phone number, I will put that on my online registration form. They have a number to call if I pop up on their screen. Look at these as like belt and suspenders. AIS is great. It contacts the boat that's closest to you where you are, and they are your best point of rescue. However, the PLB will also tell the Coast Guard in the world where you are, so they can send a rescue plane also if necessary. They're not that expensive. They're about $250 each, and it's a relatively good insurance policy. When you arrive in Bermuda, the only place that you can clear customs is at the Royal Hampton Amateur Dinghy Club in Hamilton. You cannot clear customs in St. George's. So if you finish after sunset, it's recommended that you anchor in St. George's for the evening. It's about 2.5 to 3 hours around the island to get into Hamilton. The channel is well marked. The marks are lit at night, but there are lots of other lights out there. And if you're not familiar with the channel, it can be tricky, particularly at night. And even if you make it around to Hamilton to the Dinghy Club safely, immigrations people will have gone home at 5 o'clock. So they won't be able to clear you ashore. The dock master probably will have left. There'll be no one to guide you into your slip. And the anchorage is going to be packed with boats. So there may not even be a place for you to anchor. Safest thing to do is go to St. George's, anchor, have a drink or 2 drinks, get up next morning and motor around to the Dinghy Club. Oops. Oh, sorry. Again, to begin, best visit our website, review the eligibility requirements in the notice of race. If you have any questions, contact us at MarionBermuda.com. Review the safety equipment requirements. If you're interested in having a co-pilot to help with preparation of the boat, you can contact us through the website or email us at copilot@MarionBermuda. If you like a courtesy inspection, that can also be done through the website under the resources link to official documents and then inspection, and then you'll find a list of inspectors for your local area that you can contact. I guess COVID statements required or expected. Really, there are no restrictions. The only thing that's expected is that if there are any local restrictions or CDC guidelines, that you please observe them in Marion and Bermuda, but you're not required to have proof of vaccination. You do not need a Mariners travel authorization. Just a standard arrival card is all that's going to be required. And there'll be no testing for COVID either before or after the race. That's what the current requirements or condition is. Of course, they are subject to change. Some important, these are important dates, things to do. If you don't have a life raft or a sat phone and you're going to hire one or rent one for the race, you probably should do that quickly, particularly for a life raft. There aren't that many available in the area, and we're not the only race. So if you're going to need that, probably should make those arrangements early. Also, you'll need a valid passport for every crew member. So if they don't have one, they probably should get the application in sooner than later. I mentioned the race symposium on the 25th, April 17th. The entry fee will increase a bit. And then on the 15th of May, sailing instructions will be posted. Other important date, June 7th. A lot of things happen on June 7th. Online registration closes. You have to have your handicap certificate to the race committee. Inspections have to be complete. Your crew list has to be submitted in writing. You have to declare whether you're sailing with or without a spinnaker, whether you're going to navigate celestially or electronically. A couple things on the 8th, communication, your sat phone. You have to demonstrate the use of your sat phone to receive and send messages. Then the skippers meeting on 15th of June and the race is on the 16th. Other stuff to make sure you have your life raft, man overboard module. The flares all have valid inspection dates. The EPIRB, AIS, and PLB is registered to the boat. That's extremely important, so they know who they're looking for if they go off. You probably need an insurance writer from your insurance company. You may also need a survey. You should arrange for that early. Coming back to the country after the race, you will have to clear customs, but Customs and Border Patrol now have an app called CBP Roam. It allows you to register to the boat for re-entry prior to the race. You have to have all the passport information for all the crew members that are going to be on board, but you can do this ahead of time. And then when you're about 20 miles from land, you can contact Customs Border Patrol through your cell phone, and you can clear customs on the phone. You don't have to go into an official port of entry. I mentioned that you should have a letter of departure for your return crew. They're arriving by air. Medical history form. It's recommended that each crew member submit in writing any pertinent medical issues that they have, medications that they're taking, any allergies that they have. So in case they are injured or become sick and are unable to clearly communicate, that information is available to help with their care, and go out before the race and sail the boat, practice your drills. And then lastly, when you're in Bermuda, you should have a plan to get more fuel for the return home if you need it. It's available in Hamilton and St. George's, and also should have a departure plan from the dinghy club. It's usually the Sunday after you finish. Other resources you'll have during the race. Each boat is equipped with a GPS tracking device through Yellow Brick. This allows the race committee to keep track of all the boats during the race. It also allows your family and friends back home to keep track of your progress during the race. You have to carry the satellite phone. So if the race committee needs to get in touch with you for any reason, they can do so, or you can get in touch with them or the Coast Guard in case of an emergency. The phone has to be on 24 hours a day and has to be monitored at least several times during each watch. Another resource that you'll have available during the race is Maritime Medical Access. This is a group of emergency medical physicians through George Washington University who routinely provide remote online medical care or consultation. They are available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You have access to them, I believe, for 2 weeks, from the start of the race until the beginning of July, when you should be returning home. This is a list of resources. Marion Bermuda website is a font of knowledge, and with all the information, it's probably your best resource. Your rating certificate is available through US Sailing. There's also a link on the Marion Bermuda website which will bring you to that. Some publications. I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors for the race. The organizing committee. And with that, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I guess we're open for questions. Okay, so if you have a question that you'd like to ask verbally, use the hand icon, please. Is there a question? Okay. Yes, I guess if there are no questions, that's the presentation. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope it's been informative. And again, if you have any questions afterwards, you can contact us at through race@marionbermuda.com. And we hope to see you June in Marion and again in Bermuda.
Nice job, Bob.
And how do we sign off?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Vince. I'm going to stop the recording at this moment.
Hey, Vince, I just saw one hand up.
Saw one hand up and then it went away.
Yeah, true. I think it was
Ellie?
Aeneas. I'm going to ask him to unmute.
I thought I saw Ellie Lapkin.
I did see
Oh,
that
I
too.
didn't have a question. I was just doing the applause for.
Oh, the applause one. Well, thank
Yeah, I
you.
just had one question or one. Oh, okay. Is that when we get together in Beverly, what's the typical experience there?
I'm sorry.
When we get together in Beverly Yacht Club, just before the takeoff, what's the typical way of doing things?
Typical experience for the crew.
The crew, the skipper, the boat.
Well, the notice of race states that the skipper and enough crew to safely manage the boat have to have offshore experience of 250 miles each. So like, it's somewhat at your discretion how many people it's going to take to safely manage the boat. But there should be people on board that have been offshore before.
And yes, this is Steve Ritchie. I think what you may be looking for is, you know, in the 24 or 48 hours before the race, there's a lot of provisioning that gets loaded onto the boats, you know, back and forth from the docks are being ferried out on the launches.
Yes.
And then by that afternoon, the Thursday afternoon, people start assembling for the skipper's briefing, and then there's the cookout dinner that night. But most of the activity, like I say, the 48 hours before is basically boat centered, getting the final things done and getting the food on board.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Vince.
Yeah, the launches will be running constantly. I think we have 2 launches from the club, and do we get one from Barden's too? Yes. So we'll have multiple launches running to bring provisions out to boats. The launches will probably be running from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 at night. Okay. Aeneas?
Yes, thank you.